Well, the G7's rebuke of Russia coincides with a surprise visit by Vladimir Putin to the Ukrainian front lines. It's the Russian president's second trip to occupied territories in Ukraine since March, and the closest he's been to the front lines since the invasion in February last year. The Kremlin reports the leader was unaccompanied by key military personnel, including the defense minister and the chief of general staff, as a security precaution. State media shows President Putin touring what's believed to be a military command post in Kherson, where he met with some of the top military brass. Reports suggest he then proceeded to conduct a similar visit in the Russian-held region of Luhansk. The Kremlin indicates these trips took place yesterday, but doubts have been cast over the exact date after Mr Putin was heard wishing troops a happy Easter, which Orthodox Christians celebrated last Sunday. Still, the rare visit to the two frontline areas has prompted strong criticism from Kyiv. It's accused the Russian leader of visiting the scene of crimes committed by his, quote, minions. Meanwhile, a Russian court has denied bail for U.S. reporter Ivan Gershkovich. Footage shows the first glimpses of the jailed American journalist since his arrest in Russia. The Wall Street Journal reporter can be seen standing in a glass and metal enclosure inside the courtroom. He was arrested last month on spying charges as part of a sweeping Kremlin crackdown on dissent amid the war in Ukraine. If convicted, he faces up to 20 years in prison. For more, we're joined by Shelby Wilder, live from Kiev. Shelby, a rare trip by Mr Putin to the front line, which some might consider a huge security risk. What do we know so far about this visit and, perhaps more importantly, its significance?
Absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, Russian President Vladimir Putin made this surprise visit to military headquarters in the east of Ukraine in the Luhansk and Kherson regions. We should note that Russia has partial control over those areas. Now, we couldn't verify when Putin made this visit, but the Kremlin said, as you mentioned, that it was yesterday, and photos and videos show the Russian president getting out of a helicopter and seemingly meeting with senior military commanders and also troops. And in these briefings, he asked for their reports and their opinions, and they were discussing the military situation at present and the plans for the near future. We should note that these territories in eastern Ukraine, the four regions of Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia and Kherson, were annexed, or at least claimed to have been annexed by Russia in the fall. And they're intended to be the focal point for the highly anticipated spring counter-offensive that will be launched by Ukraine. But as you mentioned, this was a rare visit. Putin's second trip to Ukraine since the full-scale invasion. The last time he was in the country was in March in the occupied city of Mariupol, but he is seemingly trying to drum up support as there is anticipation of this looming Ukrainian counter-offensive.
Shelby, perhaps in response to what you just referred to as the Ukraine spring counter-offensive, some reports suggesting Russian forces making some advances into Bakhmut. Any evidence of that on the ground?
You are absolutely right. So this visit by Putin coincided as Russia is stepping up attacks on that besieged city of Bakhmut in the east of Ukraine in the Donetsk region. We actually heard Ukrainian military officials say today that there had been an increase in heavy artillery and airstrikes in and around that destroyed city. We've also heard recently claims by the infamous Wagner mercenary group stating that the fighting has moved to the center of that city, making these incremental gains. But it has come at an incredibly high cost for both sides, but particularly for the Wagner mercenary group, as they have been sending in their soldiers essentially as cannon fodder as Ukrainian forces desperately try to hold on to that city. Now, if the Ukrainians were to lose Bakhmut, it would be a symbolic victory for the Kremlin, but not a strategic one. Bakhmut itself, not only has it now been destroyed after many months of fighting, but it doesn't have major significance. But what it would allow for is for Russian forces to better position themselves and try to push further west towards key Ukrainian cities like Kramatorsk, where there is a heavy Ukrainian military presence. But again, we are following the Battle of Bakhmut, which has intense, fierce street battles happening at this very moment. And we will see whether the Ukrainians manage to hold on to that city or whether the Wagner mercenaries continue to make these minor but significant gains as they aim to take that city in the east of Ukraine.
Thanks for that report. Shelby Wilder reporting live to us there from Kyiv.